Hello, my bookish friends. It is Natalie, and we are here for a very long overdue wrap-up, 3 months worth, going back to the April Owls. And because we have 25 books that I need to review for you, we need to just jump into it right now. All right, the first books that I'm going to review are going to be what I believe are the books from the Owls. Please don't ask me what the specific prompts were. I will do the best that I can as far as trying to remember, but more importantly, you want to know if these are books you should read. So let's start with Fire and Heist. This was a book in a book haul, and I believe I read it in relation to the Owls because it had to do with dragons. More specifically, were-dragons, people that could turn into dragons. This was a YA urban fantasy. This is taking place right here on Earth. People know about were-dragons, but they kind of have their own society. Our main character is Sky, and in the were-dragon society, you move up in society by completing heists and, capturing all sorts of treasure. And the greater the treasure, the higher your family moves up in the social ranks. Now, Sky's family has fallen to the bottom of the social ranks because the last heist that her mother attempted, one, she failed and she disappeared. So this has left her family, obviously in chaos. And even though Sky is very young, she decides that she is going to try to complete what her mother started and also hopefully find her mom. This was a 4-star read for me. I enjoyed it very much. It was recommended to me by my TBR service. And yeah, were-dragons. How can you go wrong with were-dragons? Then I jumped into Fangirl. I don't know if it had something to do with it being green or being a contemporary. I just don't remember. I would say this is a new adult / kind of college age, a contemporary. And real quick before I dive into it, please hit subscribe and please hit that notification bell since my upload schedule is absolutely chaotic. And please follow me on Instagram. If you don't have a bookish account, please leave me a DM letting me know that you are following me from the book channel so that I can follow you back. So this is a very popular book on BookTube. I think most of you have probably heard of this book if you haven't already read it. Our main character is Kath. She is a twin. She is also a person who writes a lot of fan fiction for a series called Simon Snow, which is basically a kind of a takeoff of Harry Potter. But now she's going into a whole new world of college. She assumed that her twin would want to be roommates with her in college. They would continue to write fan fiction together. And her sister's like, no, we're going to college. Let's do our own thing. And it's kind of how she kind of copes with becoming her own person. Now, this is a 3-star read for me. Now, remember, anything 3 stars or higher are books that I do recommend. And I am very curious because in this book, if you've read it or if you haven't read it, she actually has excerpts from her fan fiction, and it's actually really good. And Rainbow Rowell has, I think, written 1, 2, 3 books that are based on the fan fiction, meaning the Simon Snow series. She's actually written some books that are Simon Snow books. Now, those I haven't read. I don't know if they're worth picking up. If you've read them and you've enjoyed them, please let me know, because I am so curious. Next, I read The Deep. I believe I had to read something that had to do with water or the ocean or a ship or something. This was an adult historical fiction paranormal thriller. And it involves the real-life disasters of the Titanic and the Britannic, which were sister ships. Our main character is Annie. On the Titanic, she works as a steward. She survives the Titanic sinking, and then later on, she goes to the Britannic as a nurse because that is a hospital ship. And it's really cool because when she's on the Titanic, she's interacting with real people that you've heard of from the Titanic, and there's really creepy things going on and seances. That I really enjoyed. And when she goes on the Britannic, it kind of brings back a lot of the characters, brings them back together, the ones that didn't, die in the Titanic. And that's when we finally get some answers about all these supernatural things happening. I'm gonna give this 3.5 stars. I was like 3 stars, 4 stars, 3 stars, 4, 3.5 stars. I mean, it's almost a 4-star, but I don't think it quite got there, but it was more than a 3 star, so we're gonna go with 3.5 stars. All right, next was 6 of Crows. This is a YA high fantasy. I don't remember the prompt. Maybe it had something to do with birds or something. I don't know. But we're back in the Grishaverse. I did read the first book in the Grishaverse trilogy. I enjoyed that. And this book is basically about 6 outcasts who have to try and perform a very, very dangerous and high-risk heist. Now, this book has been hyped up, and I've had this book built up so much in my head that I think it really set me up for failure when I read it. Now, I did enjoy it, but it was only a 3-star read for me when I assumed it was going to be a 5-star read after all the hype that I heard. Also, the fact that I just loved Ninth House. So I thought, oh, definitely, I love Ninth House. This is supposed to be even better than Ninth House. And I enjoyed it, but for some reason it was not, to me, what it is for so many people, and I don't know why. All right, moving on to our first 5-star rated book, and that would be A Discovery of Witches. I'm pretty sure the prompt was read a book with witches in it. There you go. This was an adult urban fantasy set around Oxford, and I really enjoyed it. It kind of reminded me of like The Diviners and Ninth House. It kind of had similar vibes. The main character is Diana. She is a non-practicing witch who comes from a witch family that is like a long-lined witch family that goes all the way to Salem, but she is an scholar at Oxford, and she actually studies the history of science, which I found fascinating. So even though she does not practice magic, when she is in the library doing her research, she pulls a book up from the stacks, and when she starts looking at this book, all these weird things starts happening. She starts seeing things, definitely something magical is happening. She obviously wants nothing to do with her magic, so she returns the book back to the stacks. And all of a sudden, there's supernatural creatures who are just coming from all over, who are kind of just following her and watching her. And in this world, we have 3 kinds of supernatural creatures. We have witches, obviously. We also have vampires, and we have demons. So our second biggest character is a vampire who is, yes, very interested in this book, but he's also very interested in Diana, and also becomes very interested in protecting her from all of these supernatural beings that are coming for her, trying to get her to give them this book. So I'm very excited about jumping into the second one. I'm so glad this is a trilogy that has already been written, so I don't have to wait around for it, but highly, highly, highly recommend it. It is a long book, but it is a wonderful book. Next, let's talk about Not Even Bones. I believe the prompt was just read something with a white cover. This is a YA urban fantasy, and I just thought it had such a unique storyline. So our main character is Nita, and her mother goes out and kills supernatural beings and then brings the bodies back because Nita likes anatomy and likes to dissect these bodies. Until one night her mom brings home a live supernatural being and, puts it in a cage, and the supernatural being is basically begging Nita, please save me. And she ends up saving him, and the next thing she knows, her mom has sold her off because she happens to have some supernatural powers. But I gave this 4 stars. I do recommend this. Stephen King's The Institute. Ever since I started this channel, I've been rambling on about I wanted to read a Stephen King book, and now I can say that I have, and that I enjoyed it immensely. Basically, The Institute is a horrible place where they kidnap children who have any kind of telepathic skills, any kind of telekinetic skills. They usually kill off their parents so that nobody goes looking for them. They're experimented on. Not a great place. You don't want to end up here. But it was promoted as having a lot of kid power, like It or Stranger Things, and that it really delivered. It really did remind me of that. I love the way the kids work together in this book. Now moving on to books that I don't think were owls related, but I could be totally wrong. The first one was Veronica Roth's first adult book, Chosen Ones. I've mentioned many, many times before how much I love Divergent. In fact, Divergent really pulled me out of, I can't even call it a reading slump because I was not reading at all. But the synopsis is 15 years ago on Earth, some kind of magical creature called the Dark One started causing all kinds of catastrophes and was basically, destroying the Earth. And then 5 ordinary teenagers were prophesized to be able to bring him down. And they did. So now it's 10 years later, and we are celebrating the anniversary of the Dark One's demise, and one of our chosen ones dies, and the rest of the chosen ones are kind of ripped away somewhere where they realize that what they thought was happening was not exactly the truth, and there's a much bigger picture of what's happening. There's obviously going to be more than one of these books. Now, I don't know how many, but very interested in where this is going. So I think in the end, I gave it 3.5 stars. All right, next I jumped into The Kingdom, which is kind of a YA sci-fi, but it's got fantastical elements to it. So The Kingdom is an immersive theme park where you can literally ride on dragons. So it is set sometime in the future, and there are 7 princesses that are androids that are like the favorites of the park. Our main character is one of those android princesses, and our main character is named Anna. And the story is told in first person, so Anna is telling us this story, and you can see as an android she is growing as far as intellect and feelings and emotions. But then she is accused of murder and she is put on trial. So we have her telling the story, we have excerpts from the trial, we have interviews, And I enjoyed this. If you've ever seen the show Westworld, it's basically like Westworld, except if we did a fantasy theme. And it ended up being 3.5 stars. I enjoyed it, but I thought it could have been just a little bit better. It could have given me a little bit more. Now, then I read This Coven Won't Break, which is the sequel to These Witches Don't Burn, which I really enjoyed and I explained was super, super fun. So I was so excited to jump back into this world. The general idea of these 2 books is our main character is Hannah, who is an elemental witch. In this world, there are all sorts of different kinds of witches. There's blood witches, like I said, elemental witches. I can't think of the other, but there's different kinds of witches. And in the first book, she knows that her coven is being threatened. She doesn't know who is threatening her coven, but there's definitely crazy things going on to make her realize that her fellow witches are in danger. And that story continues on with this one. Like I said, so much fun. Highly, highly recommend. And I gave this one 4 stars. All right, then I attempted, after having such a great time with that sequel, I decided, hey, let's jump into another sequel. Let's jump into The Deck of Omens, which is the sequel to The Devouring, which I really enjoyed and gave 4 stars last year. And I got about this far through. Now, I'm not saying this book is bad. I'm saying that you probably need to go reread The Devouring, because this book is not really going to give you a whole bunch of, info to kind of catch you up and help you remember what happened in the first book. It basically takes off right from the first book. And as I'm reading, I'm thinking, it's going to come back to me. I know it's going to come back to me. I remember certain things and certain characters, but not enough came back to me. And I realized I'm missing major elements of the story because I simply am not remembering what happened to every single character in The Devouring Grey. Obviously, I didn't rate it. Then I jumped into Girl Gone Viral. In this book, our main character is Opal. She is 17. I would say this was a YA sci-fi would be the best, I think. YA sci-fi, that's what it is. And her father disappeared when she was very young, and now there's this contest that if she wins, she will get to meet a man who was her father's best friend, and he's, supposedly can maybe help her find her father. At least that's what the synopsis tells you, but the book really goes in quite a different direction than what the synopsis tells you. Basically, there is a program in the future, it's called Wave, and the best way I can describe it is it's sort of like YouTube, but if we were more immersive. So imagine like Ready Player One, we're actually kind of going into the worlds, but yet you are having like shows. So you could, I don't know, people are literally sitting in like theater seats, and you can, go on stage. That's why I say it's like YouTube. You could go on stage and talk about books, I guess, but you could actually, feel like you were, sitting in front of a crowd of people who are watching your video. I don't know, I'm probably not describing it well, but that's the best way I can think to describe it. I gave this, what did I give this book? I gave this book 3 stars just because, once again, I felt like it could go somewhere else. I thought maybe if it had a sequel, because it left a lot of questions kind of unanswered, and then some questions it wrapped up so quickly that it didn't, I don't know, I felt kind of empty afterwards. It's not a bad book. If you enjoy books about virtual worlds and whatnot, you might very much enjoy it. Like I said, I gave it 3 stars. Anything 3 stars or higher, I do recommend, but it could have been a little bit more for me, and don't trust the synopsis because synopsis is not quite what it's about. The Cheerleaders, a YA mystery thriller. I enjoyed this very much. So supposedly 5 years ago, 5 cheerleaders died in 3 different horrible circumstances. And so the whole cheerleading team was kind of disbanded because, just left everybody so upset. And it's 5 years later, and our main character is Monica. And Monica is the younger sister of one of the girls who died. And Monica really wants to move past this. She's part of the dance team. So I guess instead of cheerleading girls who, like dancing, they joined the dance team. Until she finds some very strange letters in her stepdad's office. She also finds her sister's old cell phone with really weird text messages. She starts getting weird emails. There's a new girl that she starts interacting with who seems to know a lot about 5 years ago, and it's kind of like, why do you know so much? And so she decides that maybe what she's been told about what happened isn't actually what happened, and she starts trying to unravel what really happened. And like I said, really enjoyed this, thought this was very well done, very edge of my seat. I didn't figure it out, which is always a plus. So 4 stars, highly, highly recommend. All right, getting to our first 2 stars. And I usually say, well, I don't usually have 2 stars because if it's a 2 star, I'm gonna DNF it. Well, sometimes You'll read a book thinking, it's gonna get better, it's gonna get better, and it just never got better, and then it was like, oh, I finished the whole thing. Okay, so it is The Fascinators, and it has such a great synopsis. I'm like, why did this book fail me? So it's about this group of friends who are part of a magic club, and so it's kind of a YA urban fantasy. I mean, we're on Earth, but there's this tight group of friends who are part of the magic club, and if you're in the magic club, you go to some big magic tournament, and you can, win things, and that's ultimately their goal. Somehow in the beginning, one of the members somehow steals a magical book from another magical, like a group of adult magical people who really want their book back and are being kind of trying to get their book back in a lot of terrifying ways. I know, doesn't this sound great? And then the group starts kind of splintering off. There's some relationship issues. I don't know, I kept waiting for things to really start coming together, and it just, for me, it just didn't. I mean, it wasn't horrible. I mean, I wouldn't give it a 1 star, but definitely it didn't reach 3 stars. Like, I wouldn't really recommend it. And I don't usually say that, do I? The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. I'm not going to talk too much about this because I'm really going to probably say what 80 to 90% of other booktubers are saying. This was a 3-star read for me. I didn't get really attached to the characters. If you're wondering, well, I'm one of those few people I actually do not know what it's about. It's about the 10th Hunger Games. If you read or seen the Hunger Games, the original, it's set like I think the 75th, 76th. So we're going back quite a long ways where President Snow is not the president. He is a college student who has been chosen to mentor one of the tributes. And like everybody else said, it was very interesting to see how far the Hunger Games have come, how certain things developed, how certain ideas, kind of manifested over the years. That was fascinating. Did I get attached to any of the characters? No. And there were some points where I thought, shouldn't this be almost over? Gosh, how much longer is this book? I know it's going to be made into a movie, but if you're looking for a 5-star read that's going to be up there with Hunger Games, I mean, I love the Hunger Games. I loved Peeta. He was like my favorite character. And of course you love Katniss and, the sacrifice she made for her sister. This ain't it. But if you just want to hear some history and whatnot, you will enjoy it. And that's all I got to say about that. So I jumped into Cress. If you don't know much about the Lunar Chronicles, each book is a retelling of a fairy tale, even though this is set in a sci-fi world. And so Cress is a kind of sci-fi retelling of Rapunzel. I enjoyed this very much. I think I even enjoyed this more than I enjoyed Scarlet. I enjoyed Cress's character, and I enjoyed the storyline that went with it. Not that I didn't enjoy Scarlet, but I do think I enjoyed this a little bit more. I am currently about to jump into Winter, which is the final book, which is a retelling of Snow White. I hope I enjoy it. So the next book I want to tell you about is a YA high fantasy called Bone Crier's Moon. I'm just realizing now how many of these books are YA. My gosh, a lot of these books are YA. I do read a lot of adult books. A lot of the adult books I read are the books from the celebrity book clubs that I follow: Reese, Oprah, Emma Roberts, and Read with Jenna. I will leave the link. Please check out the celebrity book club reviews that I've been doing. Oh, fascinating books. Fascinating books. You don't want to miss those videos. But anyway, back to this book, Bone Crier's Moon. I halfway buddy read it with Danny from Current Chapter. We stopped buddy reading it halfway because our Songbird, Ballad of Songbird, the book I just talked about, the Hunger Games prequel came in, and we both wanted to dive right into that, so we both put this to the side, and then we both got back to it at different times. But I always say I usually enjoy urban fantasy much more than high fantasy, kind of as a rule. But this one I really enjoyed, and what I enjoyed is that it was so fast-paced. I mean, literally the first page, when you jump in, we've got 2 girls who are chasing a tiger shark. I was like, whoa, this is fascinating. Now, bone criers are women who ferry the dead either to heaven or hell, or what this fantasy world's version of heaven and hell is. Our main character is Elise, and part of being able to ferry the dead, it is seen as a privilege. I mean, I don't know why it's seen as a privilege. And to have this privilege, you have to kill your true love. Now, you can do this one of 2 ways. First, you have to enchant or call to your true love on a bridge. This is kind of like your rite of passage, and this will bring your true love to you. Now, if you're thinking that you don't want to have any children, then after you enchant him, you kill him. Now, if you do want to have a child, well, then I guess you kind of talk to him and you dance with them and you hang out with them for a year, get pregnant, and then you kill him. So either way, it doesn't really work out really great for him. Very fast paced, but what happens is, well, I'm not gonna tell you everything that happened, but just enough to get you interested. Elise is trying to do her rite of passage, but our other main character is Bastian. His father, he actually as a child witnessed his father being killed by a bone crier, and he is out for revenge. So he kind of shows up to her rite of passage, causes all kinds of chaos, and everything in the world, it just goes kind of crazy. It's a long book, but fast-paced. Really enjoyed it. Cannot wait for the sequel. Highly recommend. All right, I have another 5-star read for you, and that is The Girl from Widow Hills. It was by Megan Miranda. I completely forgot that I pre-ordered it, so I was so excited when it just showed up on my doorstep. Our main character is Olivia. But when she was a child, her name was Arden, and she had this really peculiar thing happen that she was sleepwalking as a very small child, and because there was a rainstorm and there was some flooding, she somehow got washed away into the pipes. I'm thinking, you know, underground water pipes. And she disappears for 3 days. She becomes a national story. And then one night, somebody's walking by a pipe or a vent, or I don't know much about piping, and they see a little girl's hand, and there's a picture of it, and she gets saved, but she has no memory of it. And her mom gets like a book deal, and people are always following her, kind of like chasing that fame, and she really wants nothing to do with it, which is why as an adult, she goes by her, I believe it's her middle name, Olivia, and changes her last name and kind of goes off to, you know, lead her own life and, you know, get away from this story and this fame that's related to the story. But she starts to feel like she's being watched. She's hearing weird noises in her house. She works as an administrator at a local hospital in a really small town. And then one night, she sleepwalking and stumbles across a dead body. The dead body happens to be the man who saved her life, the man who saw her little hand go up and grabbed it, and there's pictures of it and all the papers. And she's like, what in the world is like happening here? This book was done so well, and I fell asleep halfway through this and dreamt about this book, and it scared the mess out of me because I couldn't figure out what was going on. I really couldn't, and it had a wonderful solution, or not solution, what do you call it? Conclusion, and highly recommend. Megan Miranda, you know, is one of my favorite authors, even though I don't always rate her books super high. This was definitely, I think, the best one she's done. Definitely. All right, I got another 2-star book. I know some of you are going, how do you have all these 2-star books? Same thing as the other one. I kept thinking it's gonna get so much better. And that was Now Chirring Adamsville by Francesca Zappia. I guess she did Eliza and Her Monsters. Now I haven't read Eliza and Her Monsters. I heard it's similar to Fangirl, and I heard that it's wonderful. And this book, it had moments when it was really great. The synopsis was great, but it just never reached its potential. Now, our main character is Zora, whose mother has disappeared, and Adamsville is a town that is known for being haunted, kind of like a tourist attraction, like, ooh, let's go to the Adamsville where it's supposedly haunted. But it turns out, no, it's actually haunted. And Zora can actually, you know, see these ghosts, and some of them are very dangerous and like to start fires, and so she has to help, you know, get rid of ghosts, but she ends up in situations that make her look really bad, you know, because if she goes and stops a ghost from, you know, burning something down, and she stops the ghost, but yet she's still standing there, and the, you know, fire truck shows up and she's standing there with a fire that's going out, they, you know, think she's an arsonist. So she doesn't really have a great reputation, even though she's really doing her best. But now there are ghosts that are like flat out framing her for crimes, and she's trying to figure out what she could do. And like I said, the synopsis sounded great. There were times in the book I thought, oh, this is really good. I was enjoying it. And once I got to the conclusion, and it was just kind of, I don't know, kind of fell apart a little bit for me. I'm assuming this is going to have a sequel since there were so many unanswered questions. I will be upset if there's not, even though I don't know if I'd read it. But for the people who read it and enjoyed it, they deserve a sequel, because you didn't answer a lot of questions, including, well, I won't tell you what including because I don't want to ruin the book for you, but a lot of questions were not answered. All right, now for 10th Girl, which was a, I don't know, YA paranormal thriller. When I hauled this book, I got so many comments about, I'm really interested to see how you feel about this book after you've read it. And I've seen people review this book, and I've heard weird reviews, so I did not know what I was jumping into. The best way I can describe it is like 80% of this book, it reminded me a lot of the movie The Others. I don't know if you guys have seen that. It has Nicole Kidman in it. If you haven't, go see it. It's fantastic. But anyway, it had a lot of creepy vibes. I was loving it. I was like, oh, I love these creepy vibes. It's about a young 18-year-old girl named Mavi who goes to teach at a school that's on the tip of Argentina. So of course it's, surrounded by ice because it's almost in Antarctica. And she's escaping because her mother, I guess there was a lot of, political unrest from where she was from. So she's kind of hiding from all of that down in this isolated school for girls that only has 10 students. And she's been told, don't roam the halls at night. There are others. And this book is told in two perspectives. It's told by Mavi, but it's also told by somebody known as the other. And for most of the book, you're like, is this other a ghost? Like, who is this other who is, also telling the story? And I will admit, when you finally find out what the heck is actually happening, I was like, what? I don't know how I feel about that. If this book had been shorter, I would think that might have been a great ending. I've actually, for those of you who've read this, I've actually seen a couple of movies that had kind of endings like that where it worked. I don't think it worked here because it was so long, and it really, like I said, it felt to me like the movie The Others. And if you want to know, DM me on Instagram and I'll tell you what I thought was really going on. It's probably what a lot of you thought was really going on, and of course turned out to be completely different. And it was the story just took such a left turn that it was like you'd had to put the book down for a minute and kind of calm down and be like, what? Just, try to get your bearings, since this book was the what's going on, just what? But I'm going to give it 4 stars because I did really enjoy it. I thought the ending, they could have worked on the ending, so maybe I'd give it 3 stars. But I would love I enjoyed reading it. It was just the conclusion I thought was kind of odd. So I do recommend reading it. If you want to talk about it, let's DM on Instagram. I would love to have a conversation about this book. Now, something happened very fascinating, very interesting to me, book-wise, in the last 3 months. I discovered a new author. I discovered Riley Sager. And what started off was I got this as one of my book of the months. So many people have recommended Riley Sager to me, saying, oh my gosh, you're gonna love this guy. You're gonna love his mystery thrillers. So this is the first one I read, The Last Time I Lied. It's about a girl or woman who goes back to work at a camp that she went to as a girl. And when she went as a girl, I guess she was maybe 12 or 13. And she shows up kind of late when, all the campers have already been assigned to their cabins. So she ends up being put into a cabin with older girls. So I think she's like 12, 13. The girls are like 14, 15. There's like a 2-year age difference. But one of the girls does kind of take her in. And then the 3 other girls from the cabin disappear one night. And then, disappear like they are never to be found. And the camp gets closed down. So this has haunted her. She's an artist. You see these girls pop up in her pictures, because she's always wondered what the heck happened. And part of the reason of going back to this camp is she's hoping maybe she'll find finally find some answers. And I enjoyed this. This was a 4-star read. I enjoyed it so much that I immediately ordered a bunch of books. So the next one I read was Lock Every Door. Now this book is set in New York City. Our main character is Jules, and she finds out that they're on Craigslist, that there is an apartment sitter job at one of the most prestigious apartment buildings. Sounds too good to be true. She goes. The apartment is, lavish. It's huge. Not only do they need an apartment sitter that she'll be able to stay there for free, but then they're going to pay her to stay there. So now she has a place to live, and she's going to be making very, very good money. And it sounds too good to be true because, usually it is. And she starts noticing that other apartment sitters are sort of, disappearing. So she starts unraveling it, and boy, does she find some crazy things happening. So this was also a 4-star. After that, I jumped into Final Girls. Our main character in this is Quincy, and 10 years ago she went on a trip, I think, to a cabin with a bunch of her friends, and some crazy person showed up with a knife, and she's the only one who survived, so she gets dubbed by the press as a Final Girl. And there's like 2 other girls that were in similar situations that also were known as Final Girls. One of the Final Girls, because there's 3 total, one of the Final Girls is found dead, and then the other Final Girl, the one that's not dead, basically shows up on her front door, wanting to be friends, thinking maybe that they can kind of protect each other, but it's obviously she's hiding something. And this was also very good, and I gave this 4 stars. And then when I found out that his next book, Home Before Dark, was coming out, I had to get this, and this ended up being a 5-star read for me. So in this one, our main character is Maggie, and as a child, her and her parents lived in this mansion that had a history of crazy things happening, and all she knows is they lived there for a short amount of time before they literally one night ran out and never came back. And her dad ended up writing a book about what happened, and he was talking about all these ghosts and all these crazy paranormal experiences they had. She has no memory of any of this, and the book goes back from her telling what's, modern times, what's going on, because she's decided to go back to the house because she inherits the house after her father dies. She goes back to the house because she doesn't believe in any of the paranormal, but what happens with these chapters is she's telling you what's happening now, and then the next chapter you're actually reading her father's book, who is, retelling what happened when the family lived there. And, trying to have everything come together and figure out what's real and what's not real. And it was so good. I just tore right through this. So I definitely gave this one 5-star, but Riley Sager, what a find. Now, these are not the only books that I read, because I did not include any of the great books that I read from my celebrity book clubs. I will leave in the cards for you to check out the latest one, but there have been some fantastic books in the celebrity book club world that I would love for y'all to hear about as well. But wow, I'm exhausted. That was a lot to get through. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to talk to y'all later. Bye-bye.